Hey guys, welcome to lesson 8.1. Today we're going to be talking about circles and their area and circumference. We've been talking a lot about polygons and in fact they're more related to circles than we might think. So I want to take a look at this image here. Alright, so what do we notice as we add more and more sides to these polygons? And each of them are inside of a circle, right? So we start with a triangle, add a side becomes a square, add a side it becomes a pentagon, hexagon, and so forth. By the time we get to the one at the bottom, we start to see that there's so many sides that it becomes difficult to see these corners, right? It becomes difficult to identify the sides because they're getting smaller and smaller. So when you think about it, if you end up with like infinitely many sides, essentially it becomes something a lot like a circle because those sides become so tiny that it's pretty much insignificant that they're even there, right? So it becomes a lot more rounded. So we have some important vocabulary to cover with circles, and that is radius, which is the distance from the center of the circle to any part of the edge of the circle. The diameter, which is from edge to edge of the circle, but through the center. Okay, so it's also important to note that the diameter and radius have a special relationship, and that is that the radius is half the diameter. So if you have a diameter, to find the radius, you would just divide it by 2, and the diameter is in fact double the radius. All right. The last vocab word is the circumference. So the circumference is just that entire distance around the circle. In fact, it's just a fancy word for perimeter. Circles are so special that they have their own special word for their perimeter. So it's just that distance around that circle. All right. The area, of course, is the other important word, but we already know what that is, so I don't need a picture for it. So that brings us down to how do we actually find the area and circumference of a circle? So the area has a formula, and it is 2 times, oh sorry, that's not right. It is pi times the radius squared, all right? And the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. All right. The other version of this is just pi times the diameter. And the reason that's the same is because in this formula we have a 2 times an r, and 2 times r, as we saw here, is the diameter. So either one of these works. If you remember both of them, then you can use either one. You know, if I give you a radius, you can use this one. If I give you a diameter, you can use this one. Otherwise, you can always use this formula. Either way. Now let's do a couple practice problems. Here I have given you a value, and we are going to find area and circumference. So this right here happens to be a radius because we can see that it's only halfway across the circle. So we have an r value. So if I'm trying to find the area, I will go ahead and just plug that radius into this formula. So pi times 6 squared. This gives us 36 pi, which if we type that in our calculator, let's turn this thing on. Alright, so we'll do 36 times, and then the pi button is right over here. If you see this itty bitty little blue pi symbol, you just have to press second and then this caret key to get to it. Okay, and then we'll get a decimal that is 113.097. Let's call that 113.1. Alright, and we'll put units squared. If you guys remember from last semester, area always has squared units, whereas perimeter always just has plain old units. Alright, so then for the circumference, we need to do the circumference formula, which is 2 times pi times the radius. So 2 times pi times my radius was 6. So this equals 12 pi. So 12 times pi, again, you'll type that into your calculator, 12 pi. and we get 37.699. Let's call that 37.7. We don't have any units, so we'll just use the word units. Alright, so that is how to find the area and circumference given a radius. Now let's do a practice problem where we are given the diameter instead. So, as I just mentioned, this right here you can tell is the diameter because it goes all the way across the circle. Alright, so if we want to find the area, we need to figure out what the radius is first. And we know that the radius is the diameter divided by 2. So we just have to do 14 divided by 2, and we find out that the radius is 7. So, to find the area, we'll do pi times 7 squared. So let me write the whole formula first. So, pi times 7 squared, this gives us 49 times pi. So that is what we will type in our calculator. 49 pi. And we get 153.93804. So let's do 153.9 square units. And we are now ready to find the circumference. So for circumference, remember there's two versions of the formula. There's 2 pi r, where we would just plug in our radius, which was 7, and we would get 14 pi. Okay. The other option was to use the pi times diameter. Why do I keep doing that? Alright, pi times diameter. So if I do this one, I would just plug in this 14 straight away because that's the diameter. Okay, so either way you can see that we get 14 pi for our answer. So in our calculator we would just type 14 pi, and it gives us 43.9822. So we can either call this 43.98, or if I was rounding to the tenths place, I would round this to 44. And regular units, not squared because it's just a perimeter. Alright, and that is all for today. Go ahead and give those open math problems a try.